Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of She Is, the interview series, Women in Conversation. I am so delighted to finally have this incredible creature here within our presence. We have known each other for a number of years. She is a formidable woman who has done so much for our hip hop community here in Australia, for her own cultural community, representing the Polynesian community. And just in terms of youth advocacy and women's awareness, women's issues, Thelma Trey, or MC Trey as we affectionately know her, is just an incredible woman, and I'm so glad to have her on the show. Welcome to the show, sister. How are you?
Thank you, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, and what a great introduction. I appreciate sharing space with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to see you. You look very well, glowing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's the lighting, but yes, and self-care.
She's so humble, so humble. It's the lighting. I wish I could say the same for mine, but it doesn't do the same thing for me. So you are glowing. And I guess it's just that adage of black don't crack and beige don't age, sister. So I think that's just how, that's it. We're just gonna own that, okay? And that's how that's gonna be. But how is everything gone for you? I mean, obviously living in Sydney right now, everybody's using the words Freedom Day, and it's like we've all kind of come out of the dark ages. For a lot of us, having been in lockdown, it was pretty intense, and some areas felt it a lot more than others, but I think collectively Sydney really did kind of go the hard yards with this recent lockdown. So how did that affect you and your family? How are you gaining momentum after that?
The lockdowns were pretty challenging because I was based in two of the LGAs that were impacted, so Liverpool is where one of my jobs is based, Street University, but also I live in the Cumberland LGA, so that was hit pretty badly, and pretty harsh restrictions. And but I do want to acknowledge the Darug lands and the Waimali clans from the lands that I'm zooming from, and it's been challenging, but today I was reflecting on how far we've progressed, and I'm excited that we're moving to more restrictions being lifted, but it's been challenging, being restricted. I was a close contact 3 times, so that's 6 weeks of confined to my house, 4 weeks to my house, 2 weeks to my bedroom. Wow. So that was pretty challenging. Yeah, so that you can imagine that really messed with my mental health for a bit. But thankfully, I have creative outlets. So I use that time to write and reflect and plan. And I came out of it with, music and these ideas and projects. And I had set up some online shows similar to this. So then that's where I was able to connect with different people through it. And, I was working part-time. I'd taken time off one of my jobs and just stayed with one job that helped me through that process. So challenging times, but I got to use that experience and write about it, but then also help other families that were directly impacted by COVID through all of it. So, I'm pretty blessed that, there's resilience and I have connections and resources. I know that other individuals and families have not been, as fortunate. So, been challenging, but just blessed that we have access to the basics always, here in Australia.
Absolutely, you couldn't have said it better. And it's an interesting thing for creatives during this time. I've spoken to a few people, again, obviously on this platform, and picking on something you just said about, you used the time to work on new music and create other, passion projects. And that's exactly how my online sort of forum happened as well, because when you're in lockdown as a creative, it can be one of two things. It's fight or flight right? And for a lot of us, we're always survivors, so we're in total fight mode. We're constantly, you know, fighting to hold on to our you know, careers and our creativity so that that doesn't dwindle. I think it's often sometimes a gift when you have no other option but to be bound into your studio or your, you know, your space where you create, because it really makes you look at what you're creating and what happens thereafter. So for a lot of us, yeah, I can definitely echo that sentiment of coming out of this, knowing what works and what doesn't anymore, and sort of, you know, maybe moving your creative artistry into a different path. But then also focusing on the sort of unfairness of what a lot of that lockdown highlighted, and a lot of discrepancies, and you know, we didn't take, you know, you know, blind Freddie to sit there and go, well, this isn't right. You know, what was happening with certain LGAs, and it just felt incredibly divisive. More so than everyone being in it together. It didn't really feel like that for a lot of people. You lived in the real impacted LGAs, and you also represent a lot of the community that come from those LGAs. So what is the sentiment really been like for a lot of those people? Because you watch the media, but you can't believe everything you watch on the news. So being front hand, what was that like for you?
Yeah, people did feel like, you know, they were treated unfairly. The restrictions were harsher here, you know. And when we went into lockdown, we all didn't have the same restrictions. That, you know, I think it was the 10 LGAs and then the 12 LGAs were, you know, we could only 5 kilometers was the radius. But then we'd, you know, to go to Facebook and see other communities out going for a walk without a mask or hanging out at the beach. For me, I understood I need to stay home because I've got people that are highly at risk and I need to care for my family, keep myself safe. But then there's, you know, it didn't help turning on the news or seeing Facebook and hold on, they're out having coffee. Yeah. I'm here, you know, trying to keep my family safe. So, you know, there was a lot of negative feelings, you know, that I felt. But then a lot of, then I, of course, kick into advocacy mode, you know, so speaking to cultural groups that work with the police commissioner and also other advocacy groups, you know, within the health departments, and raising that voice. Sat in meetings with Gladys as well, you know, and got to raise some of these points in the first couple of weeks, you know, and then we started to see things change. But, you know, just highlighted the differences, like you were saying, you know, and we all aren't treated the same, you know. So I hope this gives everyone else a better understanding of the power dynamics that exist in this country and in a lot of other countries around the world, and that, you know, this highlights things that we need to address and that we all can do something about it, you know, because a lot of us will just go back into our usual mode and forget that things are happening. I'm just going to take care of my own little bubble and keep moving, you know, until the next thing happens.
Absolutely, Thelma, you've hit the nail right on the head. I think this was always bigger than just than COVID. It was always bigger than the vaccine rollout. It's and if you are aware of things, and if you're aware of the rights and wrongs, then that what we just came through would really have struck a chord. And I think a lot of people, it struck a huge chord with a lot of people. It was constant conversation around it, whether it was on social media or just amongst families, or, you know, even if you're talking with a friend on the phone about it, or if you had people that lived in these LGAs and you didn't, it really, you know, I always tend to look at it from a global perspective. And I think the rest of the world looks at Australia as this little island where it's always party, fun, everybody's happy, always drinking beer, putting shrimps on the barbie, and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, we're sort of, you know, pushed into this, oh my God, it's like a police state. Oh my God, they're separating the states. It was like Game of Thrones at one stage. The premiers weren't getting on, and everybody's got different rules. And to live under something like that was really quite interesting. And to be somebody, you know, that, you know, I'm an immigrant myself to this country, and to actually see it playing it out on the screen, and to sit there and go, but if we had decided to move to one of those LGAs, so we would be doing the right thing, but we're still getting treated differently from people that might live along the coastline or along the shoreline. It was just bizarre to look at it like that, but people don't realize that that's an ongoing thing, and it's happened, and it has always really happened in Australia.
That's right. And yeah, and these suburbs are based in the western part of Sydney, and so there's always been that stigma attached, and different treatment with certain cultural groups, so it's I feel for the vulnerable communities that were impacted, because they were already in survival mode, and then the pandemic happened, and then the restrictions. So you can imagine the extra layers of stress that's placed on a lot of individuals and families. The positive is it's out in the open, so people that never knew that this was playing out now saw it, like you were saying, on their TV screens, or while they're sipping their lattes, they're seeing, like my daughter would be walking in the park and the police would stop her and her friends and ask them for ID while they're exercising. I mean, that they had to do that, the police to check. But then for for a young person to be checked for exercising, and then if there are communities that have a history of trauma with authority or police, if they've come from war-torn countries, so that brings up so many other issues. So when it first started happening, there's a police commissioner cultural advisory group, and I messaged them and said, please let there be community workers from these communities walking with the police when this starts rolling out, and just to ease tensions, and then to address any language or cultural barriers, and then just to ease it out. So then, we started seeing changes. The police were delivering food packs, the army were delivering hampers and food packs as well, so they took that on board. I mean, not just from me, but in general. And, they weren't just out policing the streets, they were actually out, doing community work and caring for communities as well. So there's been a lot of positive stories and negative stories, as we can imagine.
Do you think, because obviously of the, with the incredible advocacy work that you do, and obviously just hearing from you now that you had a physical role in, having to request for, sort of extra support with, for the police when dealing with walking around in these areas, and especially with the areas where they deal with the trauma of dealing with authority. Do you think that the message has been taken on board with the I guess with the government when it comes to dealing with cultural groups? Because it was a huge bungle watching it, even when they were talking about the vaccine rollout and things like that. I'm sat here with my husband, who he's African American, so he comes from that country where it's too much media, it's too much focus on racial profiling, and we've come to Australia where it's not enough focusing on what that happens. And I'm South African, so my country, again, too much of it is shown there. And we were watching it on TV, and I'm going, do they realize that a lot of the elder community that they might be, trying to talk to get them to go and get the vaccine or whatever, English is not their first language, and they rely on their children to help them to get them to these spaces, and now they can't see them. So it's causing so much angst. Why aren't there people, translators or, people from their community initially being the ones to outpour the information? And it was only maybe a month or so down the track that we ended up seeing just that. Is that some of the work that you do behind the scenes, requesting that sort of that support?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for the Pacific communities, that's something that I advocated even before we went into lockdown. I could sense a change. I was working at Street University in Liverpool, And the week, you know, I finished up on the Thursday and I said, enjoy your freedom because we're going into lockdown. It hadn't been announced, but I could sense it. So as soon as I went home, I started, you know, contacting people. And I don't, if you go back to my Facebook posts, I started sharing resources, you know, language, but also support and where to go straight away, you know, because I was just thinking of how our communities, our vulnerable communities would react, you know, not having that support. In terms of the language, you know, eventually the government realized we need to get more languages included, you know, so they started doing that, but then also ensuring that the comprehension was there as well, you know, and how things are translated. So still, I have a colleague today that I was talking to, he's translating it into Fijian language. And he said it's so challenging trying to describe what a URL is. Imagine trying to translate URL into Afrikaans. Do you know what I mean? Or even computer, you know? So we didn't have that technology when our Indigenous languages were created. So trying to figure out how to translate that. Imagine trying to translate downloading a COVID certificate, you know? So that's the challenges that they're going through now. But, you know, the government has responded the best way it knows how to, the New South Wales state government, and they are engaging Pacific communities and other, you know, culturally diverse communities. So I pray that this has changed the way they engage our communities for the better, you know, and coming to the source and to the people, not top down, but let's meet in the middle, you know, somewhere in their engagement.
100%. You know, I think it probably has, but it took a lot of hurt and a lot of like head knocks to get there. And I think it could have been eliminated had they just maybe listened to the community sort of members and, you know, leaders and, you know, advocacy, you know, representatives a lot more instead of being as bombastic as they were. But look, you know, like we always say, this is the first time that, you know, we've all dealt with something like this, and that we've dealt with it on a global scale. And, you know, there's always going to be finger pointing and blaming, but if we've come out a little wiser and, you know, a little bit more in tune with, it's not just my world, it's everyone's world. I think that's what I tell my kids. You know, this is the one thing that you've got to learn, is that this has brought the world to its knees. And if you coming out of this wanting life to go back to normal, what was before was not very good. We have to do better. That's how I feel. We have to live a lot better and with a little bit more compassion. So I don't know if that message is going to get through to everybody. I'm a little nervous at the moment with everyone out there right now. I'm taking my time to it's the best way to move. I've been noticing the research, you know, and over the pandemic, and at this stage, you know, they're talking about, okay, what have we learned during the pandemic? What's worked for us, you know, and what are we going to keep? What are we going to let go of? So that even comes down to our own behaviors, you know, and I've noticed people seem to be taking more time. People are looking at each other, you know, a lot more friendlier. So I do feel a lot of people are just easing back into it, and I feel we've become more human, you know, or we've reconnected with our humanness. I hope so, because if it didn't make you, you know, reconnect with that side, then it's also probably brought out some of the ugliness in some people too, in terms of, you know, mad rushing to, you know, stand in line at shops for hours for what? It's stuff, you know, there's people that have lost lives and homes and families, and it on such a huge scale. So yeah, it's an interesting time for mankind, but I think where we can have conversations like this is really important, because there's so many people out there that are starved for real conversation, that are starved for conversation of purpose. But I've always felt that you are an incredible woman of purpose. For as long as I've known you, you've always had a higher, just the sort of higher calling to do exactly what you're doing now. So I guess that leads into my question about the advocacy work that you do, you know, for the Pacific community. Obviously, you are a woman of the Pacific as well. That's part of your culture. What was it though that initially made you want to get involved in advocacy work and do what you're doing?
Well, it definitely was hip hop. You know, KRS-One, you know, listening to KRS-One, and, you know, the artwork, you know, by any means necessary. I mean, KRS-One's been resurfacing lately because of a versus battle with Big Daddy Kane. You know, but then just listening to his lyrics, Public Enemy, you know, wrote a letter to the government the other day, you know, I remember taking all of this in when I was younger, because I was not getting that in high school, in Western Sydney, you know, and so I learned a lot of that, like finding my voice, and this is where you can raise your voice about things that you're concerned about, because, you know, back then I was going through a lot of that, you know, discrimination. There weren't that many Pacific kids in my high school. There was a lot of different cultural groups, but a lot of tensions across the board, you know. But through hip hop music and listening to people like KRS and Public Enemy, and also NWA, you know, because that was reflective of the Western Sydney that I was growing up in, you know, and the youth gang cultures, all of that. But, you know, not being able to see myself anywhere, or not be able to voice myself, not even in my classroom, you know, being treated disrespectfully by my maths teacher because I was in a higher maths class, you know, or and just discrimination across the board. So disengaged from school, engaged in hip hop, and set me on my path, you know. So that's where I learned a lot of that. And you know, being a Pacific person, if you mean, you've worked with Pacific people, you know, we don't really stand out. It's always the collective, and with like a lot of us Indigenous cultures, so very hard to stand up by yourself. But because of the conditions I was in, you know, I was propelled up, and then used hip hop, you know, that kind of inspired me to speak out and write about those issues. And you know, that because of that, I've been able to travel and do things that I love, but then also help to influence and make change in systems and thoughts, you know, and also in individuals. So
absolutely,
very blessed.
You are blessed, but you've blessed a lot of people as well, and it is important to you know to say that. Like I said, I keep saying we've known each other for a number of years, and obviously I did meet you in the trappings of hip hop, and you know, we always, when we had, you know, a thriving nightclub scene back in Sydney back in the day, and you were always, you know, when we were, you know, just young and fly, honey. Now we're mature and fly, but back in the day when we were childless and fly, and we'd go out, we'd always
before child, after child, they're the chapters.
Just in between. Just the in-between flyness. But it was always so lovely to see you, and you know, just watch you do your thing. Now obviously we have to pay homage to, you know, the incredible sort of collective that yourself, Maya Jupiter, and brilliant Nick Todd, Foreign Heights, which was just such a brilliant collective. The three of you coming together, the DJ and the two female MCs, that was a heady time for a lot of us in the Sydney hip hop community. We were really finding our voice and sort of taking on the world and going, hey, this is us. What was it like for you being in that group and doing what you were doing back then? What was that like?
I really enjoyed it. It was great for development, but you know, we got to learn from each other, and Maya and I are very strong individuals, you know, so you know, we were able to share and learn from each other. Amazing. We had fun times, you know, and then having like two brown women up on stage was kind of unheard of, you know, at that time. So you know, we got to share our stories and the stories of so many others as well, from different communities and representing Western Sydney.
Absolutely.
And yeah, fond memories. I actually we found some footage recently. Nick Toff sent us some footage, so we were reflecting on some of the shows, you know. So Maya's always hype, you know,
Oh.
and I'm like the cool islander, and eventually come out into a guy. So, you know, it's great dynamics, you know. And then Nick's the cool guy in the back. I don't know how he put up with us, but
Oh, he just had that. But you know what? Shout out to Nick Todd for sure, because he's another incredible hip hop pioneer. You know, a DJ who really knows his stuff, and I mean like the roots of it all. Nick has always just brought that level of cool to whatever he's involved in, and he can just mesh with. No matter what your spirit is, Nick will find a way just to chill with it and just go with it. So it worked with you girls. It really worked, and it's just so lovely to have that moment in our hip hop history. You know, we've got some incredible women that have represented hip hop in our community.
Killer Queens,
strong,
Queen
right?
G, yes. And then now, you know, with Sampa and amazing Baka. Like, the ladies are just killing it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Warrior queens, right? I mean, it's kind of just how it is in history. You know, women are we just I don't know, we hold a torch, and we really do hold that torch very differently in hip hop. So it kind of brings me back to now. You're still a student of the craft. You still love your hip hop. You're still involved musically. What do you think is the importance of the female voice in hip hop? Because you've still got such an important voice within it. But what do you think overall the impact of the female voice in hip hop is?
Well, you know, the world generally has that male lens, right? In general. And if we look at leadership, you know, whether it's running countries, running organizations, running corporations, it's still male dominated. So and you know, whatever's happening in the world always is, you know, represented or spoken about in the music space, especially within hip hop. So, you know, if we look at a lot of the music today and do searches on or research on the percentage, you know, the women being involved in hip hop music has increased, but we're still underrepresented. And then music in general, right? And, you know, the Australian Women's Music group does a lot of research on that and advocacy around it. So now more than ever, our voice is needed, you know. And, you know, I think not just writing the music, but creating the video clips, you know, curating the radio shows or the online spaces. So it's our lens, because I look back at some of my photo shoots, male photographers or videographers, and I'm like, I wouldn't have shot from that angle. You know, and like, whereas, you know, if I would have had a female photographer, she would have known which angle, or she would have told me, sis, you know, number 535's out of place. Can you tuck it in? Do you know, like, all even down to that, you know, you know what I mean? So, and look, and men are not going to talk about our perspectives. We need to talk about it, you know, and then this is music that our children are going to listen to, that they're listening to, you know, so we need to be influencing and adding to that, you know, and it makes for a better space and, you know, more equity with our voices and our creativity.
But you know what else I love?
So I'm not going to stop.
No, good.
We won't stop.
Never. So get used to it. We're here, and we always will be. But what I love about, I guess, the women in our hip hop community, I'm obviously not talking about on the global perspective, but the women who represent here in Australia have been just that, right? It's never been about the flesh, okay? And hip hop is incredibly misogynistic. I've spoken about this ad nauseum with so many, you know, other females that I've spoken to on this forum, and obviously on my radio show and through the years. The women in our community have always been about their business, right? They've never put themselves out there in any kind of way to align with the sex selves. So therefore, I'm just a pretty looking girl that might be able to spit a couple of bars, but look at me, look how I can wear this and that. But we've never been about that. Even the DJs, being a DJ myself, I always say, and I was fully clothed. And the thing that you could probably tell us apart was maybe the footwork. All right, I'd wear sky high heels, and I'd rock a club set in my jeans and a t-shirt, and really dope heels, cool nails, and that's it. But when it came to just representing, it was never with flesh, right? You look at yourself, you look at Maya, you look at Queen G, right? It was about the presence, the voice, the message, right? You girls didn't care if, yeah, like your outfits look cute, but you weren't showing anything other than yourselves. And I think that is the most powerful thing that for me, I always think about when I think about the women in our community, how proud I am to be around women who have never fallen prey to that sort of hip hop misogyny of with how sort of women look. I don't know if you agree with me. You've probably seen other things being backstage and whatnot, but I'm saying the women who are on the stage who've been gracing it for as long as they have been. Even today, shout out to Mirror as well, and Barker and Sampa. They're just doing them. They're not out there, putting on a show of anything else. That's just something that I've always been really proud of.
And I love that, we've had that ownership, and that control of how we've presented ourselves, and still be able to just rock in our tracksuits and a hoodie. I used to just wear a hoodie and a hat. People would only just see a bit of my face, but I didn't care. And I was like, and I'm like, I'm just going to stay in here and get into it. And then, it worked. And other female artists did the same, and then other days I'd want to dress up. I probably would have worn a skirt and just thought, I just want to dress up today. And that's okay for me. And, reflecting on it, most of our women have presented like that. And, I'm proud of them. But also big ups to other women I know around the world at different industries have created different styles, and big ups to them, but each to their own. And I guess the fact that we've been able to control our narrative it speaks to our power.
It really does. It's just it's no shade or no disrespect to any other female out there doing their thing. I mean, I love the Cardi B's, I love the Nicki Minaj's. I mean, they have that, they control the crowd incredibly in terms of everything that they bring to that they bring to their music, they bring to the stage. But I just look at that, it's that, I think there's something about it, there's that authenticity. It's like that Queen Latifah, Bahamadia kind of, you never be able to replicate that. Those are queens, okay? So that's the era.
Lauryn Hill.
Right? That's the era we come from. And I think that's, when I look back on the first ladies of hip hop here in this country, we definitely did do justice to that. So that's just a little something I always think about, and I wanted to kind of raise with you here tonight. So now, speaking of your music, you just said coming out of lockdown, you created some new stuff. Can you share a little bit with us what your new sound is?
I haven't been able to write for so long, like write a full 3 verses and a chorus in one sitting for so long. And I did it in the last couple of weeks in one sitting, just one Sunday, just sat and wrote, and it's commentary about coming out of the pandemic and, prepping me actually, but also just sharing things that have helped me along the way as well. So, and one of my last tracks was more of trappy vibe, produced by Chasm. So I love that kind of upbeat, kind of trappy, double time beats. I love that stuff because I love the freedom of being able to rap fast, sing, and then slow it down. Right. I love playing up with the flows. So looking forward to that. And then I just realized a producer I used to work with like over 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, has a studio down the road. I'm like, bro, I need to come and visit you. I'm like, they're popping up all around. And I love this. There's all these little, hip hop studios popping up in the West, I'm excited. Interesting times for the industry.
Very much so.
And I'm glad you and I are still involved to help guide, you know.
This is it. This is it. We will. That's why I said we will always be here. There's a definite place for us, which is great, you know. And I think, you know, with all of the different, you know, sort of areas of experience that we've had collectively and individually, I feel very sort of how can I say, confident about where our hip hop community is headed. You only have to look at the incredible amount of independent artists that have birthed themselves over the last few years. You know, our hip hop community has really gone through so many changes. From when you were, you know, at the peak of it as an artist yourself, and then, you know, obviously we watch all the other sort of kids come and go. I think the independent artists today, they're straight up no chaser, man. They don't play with their music, and I love it. They're trained to go. I call them the TTGs. They're trained to go, and that's how it should be. So it's interesting times ahead for us all, and yeah, it's just
TTG. I like that.
Yeah.
TTG.
Train to goes. They're my train to goes. I love it. They come, you know, I obviously before, you know, coming online, I was obviously still doing, you know, like live radio, which is where I started my career, and I had a couple of new artists come in. I love to meet the new artists, you know, but I'm from the old school where they come in and they give you a demo tape. And they're like, oh, can you play? Nobody else has played my music. It's a little rough around the edges. Can you play? But I want to be the first one. Yeah, no problem. No, ma'am, no more. It's finished. Everything's good. I'm trying to get these amount of hits on Instagram, and this is how many people are following me. And I'm like, oh, snap. Okay, well, I'll play it. Thanks for slotting me in on your time. So they're really flipping the whole thing, which is more power to them. You've got to control your artistry. We do it. So, but we had to learn the hard way too, I think. So, yeah, that's where we're at.
Yes, indeed.
Let's
cassette tapes. I was just gonna say I had cassette tapes.
The cassette tape. I remember that. The cassette tape.
And cassette tapes are back. You know, they're back.
Are they? Oh,
I've noticed artists are putting out cassette tapes again.
Just to be retro.
Yeah, and then also I don't know what reignited that, but yeah, I've noticed cassette tapes are back.
I don't know if I want to relive the cassette tape though. It was nice when it lasted, but I don't know if I want to relive it. That was painful.
I think it's more for the younger. I think it's the younger generation that are intrigued, because I've noticed that they've been going back to vinyl.
Yeah.
You know, and buying vinyl and then I guess after the vinyl, then it's back to cassette tape. Yeah.
Well, if they have the cassette tape, then they're going to have to bring back the Walkman. Then I might get involved. Do you know what I'm saying? Then now we're talking. I can have the personal, then we can talk. So we never know. And it's probably going to cost about $200 as opposed to $19.95 that it did when we were 19.
Beautiful memories with the Walkman.
Good times. Good times.
Yeah.
So, but before I let you go, and you know, thank you for your time tonight. Let's just talk Tapestry. This is your incredible you know, business that you have founded. It's a consultancy service. Obviously, you do a lot of the advocacy work off of that as well. Or explain to us what you do with Tapestry.
Tapestry, I started when I started putting out my own music so that I could control my music, but then I would license it to different distributors. And then after I started doing the music, then I started doing events through it, you know, and then now I also do creative workshops through it. And then this year, most of it's been consultancy, you know, like advising on, you know, pandemic messaging or creating youth-friendly videos advising on pandemic issues, you know. So that's what Tapestry is for me. And, you know, I'm hoping to get into, you know, writing as well, books, and possibly screen. So that's the
Well
next
done.
phase. So, you know, it, yeah, so it's just evolved, you know, it's basically for whatever I want to do, just through my own kind of business,
That's it.
tapestry. And it links back to tapa, which is the bark cloth that we wear with all the different patterns on it.
Oh, how
So that's
beautiful.
Samoans, Tongan, Fijian. I would usually have something close by, but yeah,
That's
so
amazing.
that's what that reference connects to. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love it. And it's whatever your purpose is, that's what tapestry will fall into. Whatever your passion project will be at the time, that's what tapestry represents. So I like that it's very fluid. And it's literally growing with you. And that's how any sort of business imprint should be. It grows with the artist, it grows with the creative. So congratulations on everything that you've done, everything you're doing and yet to do. It's always such an honor and a pleasure to speak to you and
just so
share time and space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time. And I love that you're providing space, you know, for our women's voices. And I look forward, you know, to working with you again in future and, you know, collab on something, I'm sure. And seeing each other in real life.
I know. It'd be so nice to get out of these little Brady Bunch boxes. I get so over it. But you know what? At least Zoom has given us connectivity like we've never ever seen before, and we have to be grateful to it. So technology does work wonders sometimes. So I'm grateful that we're able to do it in this manner, but I'm sure we will connect real soon. But until then, stay safe and
thank you.
Continue glowing. You look amazing, and best of luck with the music and everything. I'm always in the wings watching with wonder. So thank you, my love.
Thank you so much. Take care.
You too, sis. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Hello? Trey!
How are you?
I'm good. Are you in?
I am, yes.
Oh my god, we gotta do this.
You're thinking what I'm thinking, right?
You know it.
Well, let's get it done.
Let's go.
When I wake in the morning, I look in the mirror. I thank the Lord for what He deliver. Blessed with the best, with an S on my chest. Your kai vitilewa coming through with zest. Yes, push it on to the next test. You better have a rest, best. Believe I digest less. Remember, don't forget.